Hi, and welcome to Reed's Audio Reading. I'm Reed, and I hope you enjoy my channel. Today, I'll be reading the adventure The Standing Stone 3rd Edition, specifically Scene 4 to Scene 6. This adventure was written by John D. Radcliffe. Scene 4 Ossington. Just past the stone chapel, the road improves noticeably. For one thing, it straightens out. Also, the trees draw back a bit, revealing a pair of standing stones, one on each side of the road. These are but the first in an avenue of such stones, placed about 30 feet apart, leading into a large clearing after perhaps 100 yards. A huge circle of standing stones rings the clearing, set right against the surrounding trees, as if they were holding back the forest. In the center of the clearing stands a second, smaller circle of stones. Inside this smaller circle nestles a village, its cottages built right up against the minhers. Between the two circles lies abandoned fields, once plowed but now given over to weeds and seedlings. This is Ossington. The road the characters are following leads directly into the village, at the heart of the clearing. Observation makes it clear that the village is occupied, with people apparently going about their daily business. Spot check DC 18 to notice that they're careful to keep within the stone circle. Since the villagers keep the forest under sharp observation, approaching characters are seen once they leave the shelter of the trees, unless magically shielded from view, such as invisibility sphere. This especially applies if they simply drive the cart down the road. By the time they reach the inner stone circle, a crowd of 40 to 50 people, all dressed as peasant farmers, has formed. All look undernourished, and in fact, once the characters enter the village, the crowd presses forward, incoherently begging for food, help, and rescue. Should the party include any elf or half elf, the villagers give such characters a wide berth, despite his or her likely lack of resemblance to the Grugash. Such characters suffer a -4 penalty to any skill checks made to interact with the locals, except for Intimidate, which gives them a +4 circumstance bonus. The characters are in no danger from their over-enthusiastic welcome by this unarmed and rather pathetic mob, but it should give them an uncomfortable moment or two. If they're having trouble quieting the crowd, at that point someone strikes up a beautiful lute melody. Almost at once, the hungry villagers begin to calm down and fall silent. Anyone looking in the direction from which the music is coming can see a tall, gangly figure in brightly colored but ill fitting and somewhat ragged garments, leaning up against one of the standing stones. Eyes half closed, he quietly hums as he strums. This, of course, is Kaku. Development. Once the threat has dissipated, the bard stretches and comes forward to meet them, the crowd parting sheepishly to make room. He introduces himself. They call me the Cuckoo, and asks their names and what brings them to these parts. If they express any curiosity or concern about the troubles the locals are experiencing, he suggests they talk to Murdos, the village elder, and offers to show them the way to the elder's house. It's all off 50 feet distant. The cuckoo constantly hums or whistles, but rarely speaks except in answer to a direct question, because his voice is very hoarse, as if damaged by smoke inhalation. Instead, he prefers to let others do the talking, contenting himself with shrugs, pointing, and the like. The music. Any bard among the PC's group, or anyone drawn to the area by the haunting ballads that have recently slipped into circulation, easily recognize the tunes the cuckoo strums, hums, and whistles as those they have come in search of. If queried on this point, the cuckoo admits to having written them, muttering, "Compose better than I sing, I guess." He says he was inspired by dreams when he'd been sleeping out in the barrow, in the dolmen, or atop the ash pits beside the chapel. This is true, although he doesn't mention the fact that he wrote some of them centuries ago, when he was last in the area, and others only recently. If pressed for details, he may offer up a few historical tidbits, but for the most part, Demers, playing the part of unsophisticated savant, that's just how it came to be, I guess. Description. Once a small village, the recent troubles have reduced Ossington to a thorp, and soon it may not even be that. With the thriftiness typical of country folk, the stone-walled, thatched-roofed cottages are built right alongside the standing stones of the inner circle, sometimes using the menhir as one wall. This juxtaposition of a small farm village with an ancient megalithic monument give the place an odd look. The villagers, of course, show no awe to any of the local relics and express puzzlement if the PCs seem respectful or cautious of them. They're only old stones. 0. The well. This stone rimmed well serves the village as a source of fresh water and dominates the dusty town green where the roads ends. 1. Elder Murdo's house. The only two-story home in the village, stone first floor, half timber upper floor. This small manor is home to the town's apparent leader. Murdo's has no surviving family, but lives here with three servants, a maid slash leman slash serving wench, Lizzie, a female fox human, a butler slash valet slash cook, Raffles, a male fox human, and a secretary, Evans, a male fox halfling. One wall is formed from the easternmost of the three thrithons surrounding the central green. 2. The Grange. This large stone barn serves as a storage place for grain, a mill, and a meeting place for the villagers when darkness or bad weather prevents them from meeting outside on the green. It's also home to Peas the Granger, male fox human, and 7 fox halflings, who assist him. As with the town elder's manor, one wall is composed of the westernmost Thrithion. 3. Dyson's Tower. The tallest structure in the town, Dyson's Tower, uses the northernmost Thrithion as its entrance. It contains only 3 rooms, each taking up an entire floor. The loftiest level, the bottommost, is a living chamber with a half a dozen chairs scattered about. This is where Dyson, Tully, Henwin, and the Cuckoo gather to make their plans and evaluate their progress. A stone stair curls around the inside wall, leading up to the door to level 2, Dyson and Tully's bedchamber. The ceiling is only 8 feet overhead. Homey room. Another stair leads up to an arcane locked trapdoor that opens into a third level, Dyson's study, which contains all his notes and his experiments. Finally, a wooden ladder leads up to 12 feet to the arcane locked and double bolted trapdoor, accessing the tower roof. The tower's top is a great sundial whose gnomon or shadow stone, a miniature trifilthion itself, casts its shadow not only on a dial set in the roof, but projects onto the 5 standing stones that make up the northernmost arc of the inner circle. Fox Humans of Ossington. As noted in the Create Fox Human spell description in Appendix 3, the villagers appear identical to normal humans or halflings. Not all of them have yet taken names, so when they are asked, they are likely to give the name of one of the deceased villagers. The spell only functions properly on small or tiny animals, and between Dyson's failed experiments and overhunting, all such animals have been scoured from this forest for miles in all directions. 4. Cottage. 4 villagers, fox human, live here. They avoid attention and shy away from any conflict unless ordered into the fray by Dyson or Henwin. Their cottage is dark, the windows boarded over, but otherwise unremarkable. 5. Cottage. Flowers planted on either side of the door and under each window give this place a friendly, welcoming air. 7 villagers, fox human, claim this single room hut as their warren. They are enthusiastic supporters of Elder Murdo's. 6. Dilapidated cottage. 8 villagers share this place, the most ill kept and dirty of all the inhabited buildings. Inside, a hanging sheet divides a sleeping area from the workspace. The weaver once lived here, and his loom and spinning wheels remain. The new inhabitants, 6 fox humans, led by a particularly clever fellow named Willard, have been experimenting with these but haven't mastered the art yet. The whole place looks as if the residents have relaxed tolerance of clutter. 7. Cottage. 9 fox halflings live here in cheerful disarray. Ostensibly tailors, ever since the supply of cloth gave out, they have busied themselves in trying to scrounge up enough food to stay alive. Thus, the place is full of grass seeds, and acorns being ground into flours, grasses being leached into pots, and the like. To avoid starvation, the villagers have taken to killing one of their number every few days, who's then butchered and shared out among all the fox human inhabitants. The halflings make sure no morsel goes into waste. even grinding the bones into powder for the use in a gritty fox bread. When the PCs come to town, the halflings hide any remaining evidence from the last feast in a small secret compartment under the fireplace. Search DC 25 to find. Then build a fire over it and place a black iron pot on top. 8. Cottage. The former residents here were charcoal makers, but the current residents lack the knowledge to carry on that trade, much less the desire to venture into the forest looking for suitable wood. Instead, this rather oddly assorted trio, a male fox human, another male fox human, and a female fox human, the most dominant of the three, have started an indoor garden to grow mushrooms with little success so far. 9. Cottage. 13 villagers share this place, a stately old patriarch, whole fox human, who's sleepy by day but alert and sharp witty by night, and a dozen youngsters, the grandchildren fox human, who are active around the clock, alternating between naps and wakefulness. 1d6 are asleep at any given time of the day or night, but they rarely sleep more than an hour or so at a stretch, or stay awake for more than 2 or 3 hours straight. The grandchildren are halfling size but look human, ranging in apparent age from 4 to about 14. All act like miniature adults. 10. Cottage. This is set aside for Henwen's use, but it's apparent at a glance from the dust and cobwebs that she rarely stays here. When not at the chapel, she sometimes wanders the woods with her hobby. When in hedonistic mode, she can be found almost anywhere with the Cuckoo, her demon lover, at Dyson's Tower, or visiting Murdo's Manor, and in any other the other inhabited cottages. 11. Abandoned cottage. The door hangs by a single hinge. There's not a stick of furniture inside, and fallen chimney stones have punched a hole in the roof. This is one of several former residents abandoned as the Thorpe population diminished, both via attacks by the elves and the horsemen and the aforementioned cannibalism. 12. Cottage. This is nominally the cuckoo's house, but he rarely sleeps here, preferring to sleep outdoors at night. Where he comes from, they don't have weather per se. He sometimes sleeps atop Dyson's Tower, at the chapel, or up at the dolmen. Other nights he creeps off into the forest, sometimes under the cover of invisibility, to visit other sites, where he curls up for hours and either dreams of what passes in those places centuries ago, or works over one of his many tunes or songs in progress. 13. Abandoned house. Ossington has no inn, so Elder Murdo's offers this house to the PCs for them to use for free as long as they stay in Ossington area. The door has no lock, only a simple latch. The place is fairly clean, and the thatch roof is thick enough to keep out most rainfall. The only furniture is an old but sturdy table and a broken bed frame. 14. Cottage. Ellie, the tanner, male fox human, lives alone here. Clever and personable, with time in his hands since the hunting fell off, he attempts to befriend the PCs through small gestures, the better to keep an eye on them. Dropping by at least once a day with loans and small gifts, such as some spare blankets or a load of firewood, he reports whatever he discovers to Dyson, either directly or via Tully or the Cuckoo, whichever draws less attention. Ellie expresses curiosity about the outside world and hints at his willingness to accompany the PCs when they leave. If any PC appears susceptible to his charms, he attaches himself to that character. He can spin out stories of village life at length, each detailed but unhelpful. If pressed for information useful in resolving the present crisis, he suggests they ignore the Gazbag Murdos and put their trust in the sage Dyson. He's seen the world and there's a lot that goes on in that head. Murdos should listen to him more than he does. Ellie's cottage, should they search it, is innocuous. He had been experimenting with tanning human skin, but burns all the evidence once the player characters arrive in town. 15. Cottage. Three fox humans live here in a messy but sturdy cottage. The baker once lived here, but the current residents have stuffed the old brick ovens with straw and used them as a comfy, snug bed. 16. Cottage. Five fox humans live here. The cottage is neat but unremarkable. 17. cottage. This cottage is neat but very sparse. The three farmers, three fox humans, who live here are the only ones to break out in mourning if the pieces reveal the fate of the three peasants killed by the horsemen in scene 1. Brock's widow collapses weeping and wailing, to be helped from the scene by her brother and uncle. Alternatively, if the PCs manage to rescue the fleeing peasant in scene 1, here he reunites with his wife amid shouting, hugs, and kisses. Development. As long as the player characters remain on the good side of Dyson, the fox humans continue their masquerade as friendly, simple peasants. While some may act oddly, at times minor revisions to animal behavior, the PCs are likely to ascribe these incidents to a reaction to prolonged stress. However, should the PCs penetrate the disguise or shift their alliance away from the townspeople and towards the horsemen and the elves, the villagers turn deadly as described in scene 14. Using magic. Throughout the adventure, wary PCs may try various spells to gain information. Consider the following when determining the results of their endeavors. Even though the target of a charm spell regards the PC as a trusted friend, that does not mean he tells her all his secrets on the spot. Instead, the charm character asks permission of Dyson at the earliest opportunity to recruit the spellcaster to their cause, whereupon Dyson enjoins the character to keep the secret just a while longer as a pleasant surprise for his new friend. Detect animals does not work on the fox humans. They are humanoids now, not animals. Detect evil shows no evil on the part of the fox humans, and most of the major NPC enemies are protected in some way. Dyson, Henwen, and the Cuckoo, or are not evil Tully, Tansha, Lu, Murdos. Detect thoughts reveals the general low intelligence of the villagers, as well as thoughts of fear, hunger, or other appropriate themes. Spells that detect lies, discern lies, zone of truth, work similarly to the sense of motive skill. In any encounter with a character, major NPCs, particularly Dyson, attempt to speak as closely to the truth as possible. Extremely powerful divination magic, such as divination, commune, and legend lore, can provide useful, if cryptic, information on a variety of topics. Don't try to thwart characters who use such spells wisely, but don't give away the whole show. Scene 5. Information. Once the player characters arrive in Ossington, presumably they'll want to talk to somebody who can fill them in what's going on here. Dyson, of course, knows the most but prefers to keep a low profile. Hence, they'll initially be directed to Murdos, either by Tanusha, see scene 2, or Cuckoo, or the townspeople in general. They're unlikely to be impressed with Murdos, either at first sight or upon further acquaintance. A man of about 60, he's one of the few who shows no signs of malnutrition. Nervous, dithering, and indecisive, he's the very picture of someone who acquired his position through connections, not merit. Motivated primarily by a strong self of preservation, he hardly looks the part of a master plotter, which is exactly why Dyson finds him so useful of a tool. Whatever his character flaws, Murdos is a gifted speaker, able to judge just what an audience wants to hear and frame his words accordingly. He also has the quirk of gesturing all the time he is talking, for emphasis. He begins on first seeing the characters by raising his hand and eye to the heavens and giving thanks to all the gods, and deliverance has come at last. If asked just what's going on, he spins the following tale. It began a few months ago, he says. We've always had problems with a Grugash, that is, the wild elves who live off to the north and west. They hate everybody who isn't an elf, and I've even heard that they hate other elves that aren't of their tribe. Usually they just ignore us so long as we stay out of their part of the woods, and we let them be. It's a big forest after all, and except for a few hunters and wood gatherers, most of us rarely went too deep into the woods, while so far as we know, they rarely left the darkest area of the forest. All that changed when the horseman came riding into town, about 3 to 4 months ago, I guess it was. We never learned his name and never saw his face, 'cause he never took off that great big helmet. He visited each of the old monuments in these parts one by one: the chapel, the circles, the secret keepers, the red horse, and the old barrow. Last we saw him, he was riding away north of town up toward the Great Barrow. Then, next thing we knew, a group of woodmen who'd gone out gathering wood went missing. We found their bodies the next day, shot full of elf arrows. It was like that for a while. Somebody would just go missing, and maybe we'd find the body, and maybe we wouldn't. Then they got bolder and started shooting folks who weren't in the woods at all, but out plowing in broad daylight. Elder Merrill, the mayor before me, led a group out under a white flag for a parley, but they never came back. We found the massacre site 2 days later. He gulps and turns pale. We weren't sure if all the bodies were there or not, the way they'd been hacked apart. Merrill's body was intact, though with so many arrows shot through him that we couldn't get him loose from the tree. We tried to send for help, of course, but that's when we found out that the horseman hadn't gone away at all. He's lurking around the area, springing out to ride folks down or hack 'em to bits with the big sword of his. We figure he must be working with the elves, but I don't know why or how he gets around the way he does. Since then, things have gone from bad to worse. We had to eat the sheep and chickens, so there's no more livestock. We couldn't plant the crops, so there will be no harvest come autumn. The horseman guards the road to the south, so no one gets out that way. Not even the brave volunteers you met up with. The elves lurk up north and take pot shots at us from the woods from time to time, just enough to keep everyone lying low. Even the wild animals in the forest seem to be dying off. We're getting pretty desperate. Can you help us? Most of this is a lie, the reverse of what really happened, but Murdo's has woven enough truth into it to make it plausible. If pressed on point, he professes bafflement at why the elves and the horsemen are suddenly so hostile and asks whether similar attacks have been occurring elsewhere. He pleads with the PCs by whatever gods or goddesses you hold dear to help relieve the famine. If they could somehow hold back to drive off the besiegers, he promises every villager's eternal gratitude. He even offers them an empty cottage of their own to stay in rent free for as long as they want. If the PCs question him closely, they find that Murdos has no sense of tactics and knows little of the history of the local monuments. To him, they've always just been part of the local scenery. He can describe what they look like and give direction and how to find them, but otherwise has little helpful information. He suggests the PCs may want to consult your fellow adventurers who might know more. If queried, he explains that he means two retired adventurers, Tully, the fighter, and Dyson, the sage, who live in town and have been doing what they can to help out. Why, just 2 days ago, they volunteered to lure the horsemen and the elves off the scent of three villagers in the wagon by laying a false trail and engaging them in woods north of town, in the hopes that the wagon would be long gone along the road to the south before it was missed. By the time the player's characters have finished talking to the elder, nightfall has come, it's fully dark outside. While seeing them off, Murdos may be victim of an elven attack right before the PC's very eyes. Proceed to scene 6. If the PCs are becoming restless during the long exposition, the attack should come earlier, interpreting Murdo's speech with sudden deadly force. They can always get the gist of the unfinished conversation from Dyson and the other townspeople. Scene 6. Assassination. This attack can come at any point when Murdo's is not safely behind closed doors and shuttered windows, but is most likely to occur at the end of their long conversation with him. As he points the way to their temporary cottage, Dyson's Tower, or some other local landmark. Make the transition as smooth and unheralded as possible to avoid giving the PCs clues of the impending ambush. You can even make each character's spot check DC 30 in secret to avoid warning them of anything unusual. Success indicates that the characters notice a flash of movement behind a standing stone about 100 feet away just before the arrow strikes Murdos. It happens so quickly that if you blinked, you would have missed it. 1 second you're talking to Murdos, and the next there's a whoomph and a bloody arrow sticking out of his chest. His eyes roll up as he gruggles and pitches forward. Thanks to her True Strike spell, it's safe to assume that Yellis automatically hits, though you can roll if you want. You can either roll damage normally or assume that the arrow scores a critical hit and slay Murdos outright. Creatures: Yellis, the arcane archer, and Thalvara, the sorcerer, had put together an ambush aimed at slaying Murdos. They are invisible thanks to Thalvara's spells and positioned behind a standing stone in the inner ring. Tactics: on their turn, a giant owl and 1d3 fiendish hawk summoned by Thelvara in the 2 rounds before Yellis loosed her deadly arrow swoop down to the attack, probably taking characters by surprise. Spot DC 20 to notice them, or 15 if a character specifically stated that he or she was looking up. The hawks melee with any characters out in the open, while the owl selects a single target, preferably small, to seize it in its talons, which requires a powerful grappling check. Carry up to an altitude of 150 feet and drop. Remember that summoning monsters does not dispel Thelvara's invisibility. The cuckoo, if present, hits the dirt and begins using his Inspire Courage ability, granting the PC's morale bonus +1 on attacks and damage and +2 on saving throws against fear and charm effects, starting round 1 later. He stays behind cover for the duration of the encounter. In the 3rd round, Tully comes running out from Area 3 to join the fight. Describe her as a tall, tawny haired woman dressed in leather armor, drawing a sword with one hand while struggling to get her other arm out of a sling. She was wounded a day or two ago and has not fully healed. As the summoned creatures attack, Thalvara's Hawk Familiar delivers an invisibility spell to Yellis, while Thalvara casts a silent image of an elf archer running towards the forest, in the opposite direction the elves plan to flee. The summoned animals fight just long enough for Yellis and Thalvara to make a clean getaway, after which they fly up and vanish into the sky. The PCs are not the Fae's primary target, so the only thing that tempts the archer into risking a second shot would be the chance to shoot Tully or Dyson himself. In any case, the archer will be long gone before any PC can reach her position. Let the PCs charge off into the darkness if they like. The attackers have withdrawn long before they get there. Assuming a PC has dark vision or uncovers a light source, also unwise, a search check or wilderness lore check by a character with a track feat, DC 16, due the overcast night, finds 2 sets of faint footprints behind one of the standing stones in the inner circle. Another wilderness lore check, DC 16, can follow the prints across the field and into the forest. At that point, the DC for following the tracks increase to 26, including harder ground and the elves moving at half speed to cover their tracks. If the PCs try to follow the tracks through the forest, the horseman can reappear at this juncture, attacking any character who ventures outside the circles of standing stones into the surrounding forests. He does not cross the barrier of the outer stone circle and discorporates if somehow forces across the line, reforming 24 hours later at the tarn. Development: variations of this encounter can be run again. The PCs need not even be present, but may return to Ossington to find that another villager has been killed in their absence. Initially, the PCs will not be the primary targets of such attacks, but that changes if the Fae skirmishers see them aiding or abetting the villagers, or if the PCs lash out against the unseen archers. The elves and their allies vary the timing of the attacks to make them unpredictable, and thus harder to defend against. Sometimes the summoned monsters may be first, and then the arrows. At other times, the attack may be only the monsters or a single arrow. This encounter can easily be adjusted to occur later and make Tully or Dyson the elven archer's target. Of course, the damage won't be enough to kill either one, though Dyson attempts to bluff a major injury from the arrow, crawling away and gasping in pain. Tully charges in pursuit of her attacker unless restrained. Ruined Elven Village. The PCs probably won't discover the original Elven Village, which lies 15 miles to the southwest. If they do, they find it quite small, only 8 simple huts, all burned and quite empty. The bodies of 2 dozen elves still lie where they fell after the treacherous surprise attack by Dyson and his cohorts. Thank you for listening to this audio reading of The Standing Stone 3rd Edition, Scene 4 to 6. I hope you enjoyed and have a great day. Best regards, Reed.